Good morning, this is OmniView, episode 16, Balanced News Perspectives. Today is March 15th, 2026. We'll cover what happened, how different viewpoints frame it, so you can decide for yourself. Iran denies its supreme leader's death amid escalating US-Israel strikes and global oil disruptions. Let's start with that developing situation in the Middle East, where Iranian officials are pushing back against claims from US President Trump that the country's new supreme leader has died. Despite the leader not appearing publicly for weeks, Iran insists he's alive and overseeing matters, all while US and Israeli forces continue strikes on key Iranian sites as the conflict stretches into its third week. This denial comes amid live updates tracking the war's progress, with speculation about the leader's status adding another layer of uncertainty to an already tense standoff. Western outlets like the Daily Mail express skepticism about Iran's statements, suggesting they might be propaganda aimed at preserving internal stability during heavy bombardment, and they point to Trump's bold rhetoric as potentially inflaming the situation further. On the other hand, sources aligned with U.S. interests see the denial as a sign of regime fragility, possibly indicating internal disarray that could give the Allied forces an edge in the campaign. Meanwhile, international perspectives from Al Jazeera highlight how these unverified rumors could extend the war by muddying diplomatic waters, with some analysts warning that spreading misinformation risks confusing global audiences and hindering peace efforts. What's worth pondering here is how reliable unverified claims about leaders really are during active conflicts, especially when they could sway military strategies or public opinion. Shifting now to the U.S. side of this war, President Trump is facing criticism for seemingly prioritizing personal matters like golf outings, old photos, and ongoing feuds, even as the conflict with Iran racks up mounting casualties and enters its third week. Experts are questioning whether this focus on the trivial detracts from the gravity of leading a nation through such an escalating crisis, with the overall instability in the region showing no signs of letting up. Progressive voices in outlets like The Guardian paint this behavior as chaotic and unfit for a wartime president, arguing it mixes up priorities and could erode public trust in U.S. strategy. Conservative perspectives, however, might brush off the backlash as typical media bias against Trump, instead spotlighting his decisive moves in the conflict as the real measure of leadership. From a broader international lens, there's concern that these distractions might embolden opponents, though some see it as a calculated way to signal normalcy and resilience in tough times. The question nobody's asking enough is how a leader's personal conduct might shape public perception of their war management, potentially influencing everything from domestic support to international alliances. Meanwhile, on the Israeli front, reports indicate that Israel is running critically low on ballistic missile interceptors due to sustained Iranian attacks, a shortage stemming from depletion during a conflict last June and now exacerbated by the current war's intensity. U.S. officials have acknowledged this vulnerability, which could compromise Israel's defensive posture as the engagement drags on. Outlets like the Daily Mail stress the need for urgent resupply, framing Israel's predicament as a weak point that demands swift action from allies like the U.S. to keep the pressure on Iran. International viewpoints sometimes portray this as a stark illustration of the war's resource drain, with critics pointing to Israel's heavy dependence on foreign aid as a potential flaw. Supporters of Israel conversely view it as a rallying cry for greater global unity, while others note that Iran's tactics seem designed to wear down these defenses over time. It's interesting to consider how such interceptor shortages might alter the conflict's dynamics, possibly pushing toward escalation or opening doors for negotiation. Connected to that, President Trump has vowed that the U.S. will reopen the Strait of Hormuz one way or another, urging allies including the U.K., France, and even China to join in as Iran's blockade continues to choke global oil supplies and drive up energy prices following recent U.S. strikes. This assertive stance highlights the economic stakes in the war, with disruptions already causing surges in fuel costs worldwide. Coverage from U.S.-aligned sources often backs Trump's position as bold leadership essential for countering Iran's moves and restoring stability to energy markets. European outlets like France 24 approach it with a multilateral angle, seeing the call for help as prudent but warning of the dangers of further escalation. Critics across the spectrum argue this could spark a wider conflict, whereas proponents frame it as a smart blend of economic pressure and military strategy to isolate Iran. One thoughtful question here is what risks come with military action to reopen those shipping lanes, and how that might ripple out to the global economy. As this war unfolds, Experts are warning that the U.S.-Israel campaign against Iran could heighten the risk of terrorist attacks on American soil, potentially the most serious since 9/11, given Iran's track record of backing proxy groups and the cycle of retaliatory strikes already seen in the region. In The Guardian, the discussion revives fears of Iranian-backed terrorism as an expected consequence, with some suggesting Trump might use it to bolster domestic backing for the war. Security-oriented views stress the need for vigilance, contrasting with those who believe the U.S. overstates these threats to rationalize its aggression. Internationally, there's a thread that such risks could make allies hesitant, while others describe it as a predictable loop where military actions invite blowback, revealing splits in how threats are evaluated. What's intriguing is how credible this risk of attacks on U.S. soil truly is, and whether provoking retaliation might serve broader political aims. Turning to international responses, the UK is weighing in on the Strait of Hormuz situation, with Energy Secretary Ed Miliband indicating that Britain might assist the US by deploying minehunter drones to help reopen the waterway amid Iran's blockade. He's also tied the conflict's energy disruptions to the importance of net zero policies, underscoring how the war exposes vulnerabilities in fossil fuel dependence. British media like the Daily Mail present this as sensible ally support, linking it to homegrown debates on energy where the war highlights the pitfalls of relying on unstable supplies. Environmental critics welcome the nod to net zero as validation, but conservative angles might criticize it as stretching resources too thin abroad. On a global scale, it's viewed as building a coalition, though some warn it could drag the UK deeper into escalation, mixing strategic necessities with economic imperatives. A question to mull over is how the war might validate or challenge net zero goals, and whether prioritizing military aid makes sense amid domestic pressures. And in another layer of the Middle East crisis, Israeli forces carried out overnight strikes in southern Lebanon, resulting in at least 4 deaths in Beirut areas as they engage Hezbollah on this secondary front, further aggravating the humanitarian fallout in Lebanon amid the wider war with Iran. France 24's reporting emphasizes the heavy civilian cost, depicting Israel's strikes as worsening regional suffering and inviting backlash for their impact on non-combatants. Defenders of Israel counter that these are vital measures against Hezbollah's threats directly tied to the Iranian conflict. From an international standpoint, there's analysis that this could broaden the war's scope, straining partnerships, while others see it as Iran using proxies to force a multi-front battle. What's worth asking is how these strikes in Lebanon might influence the overall war, potentially drawing in more regional players or demanding urgent humanitarian aid. Before we go, tomorrow, watch for updates on France's municipal elections and how they might signal shifts ahead of the 2027 presidential race, especially with global tensions like the Iran war in the backdrop. That's OmniView. For full source links and more context, check out today's written briefing on the OmniView summaries page. As always, compare outlets, look for primary documents, and separate what's known from what's assumed. If balanced perspectives are valuable to you, share this with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow. This podcast is curated by Patrick, but generated using AI voice synthesis of my voice using 11 Labs. The primary reason to do this is I unfortunately don't have the time to be consistent with generating all the content, and wanted to focus on creating consistent and regular episodes for all the themes that I enjoy, and I hope others do as well.
Without taking the dive, we went on vacation. We had a nice time. My doomsday is